Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Jaya Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamti Nashtraye Shubhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtike. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsudar Goswami, chapter 43rd, June 27, 1973. From Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada went to Calcutta. He wrote to Tamal Krishna Goswami, "There is a suggestion by Shyam Sundar that I may go to London for meeting very important men there in the new house given us by George Harrison of Beatles. But I want to make some definite settlement of Bombay affairs before I return to Europe or America. If there is a suitable place for me to stay for a few days in Bombay, I can go there immediately, and from there I may go to London." Because we didn't have our temple in Bombay, so staying arrangements had to be made for Prabhupada. While considering his itinerary, Prabhupada passed some days in the Calcutta temple on Albert Road. He was very free about allowing people to see him, and his room was often filled with local Bengalis, as well as his own disciples, seated on the white sheet before him. In the evening, he would go, even when it meant riding for miles through congested parts of the city, to spend an hour in someone's home preaching Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's sister Bhavtarani, known as Pishima to Prabhupada's disciples, would also visit the Calcutta temple to see her beloved brother and, as usual, to cook for him. One day, however, a few hours after eating her kachoris, Prabhupada felt sharp pains in his stomach. He closed his doors and went to bed. His followers became very concerned. When his servant Shudkirti came into the room, he found him tossing. And it was hurting his stomach. "Prabhupada, what's wrong?" "My stomach," Prabhupada replied. "That coconut kachori, it was not cooked." The seizure continued all night, and several devotees continually massaged Prabhupada's body, especially his stomach. But with every breath, he would moan. Pishima was standing by, but Prabhupada's disciples feared her presence, thinking she might want to cook something else for him, even in his illness. Prabhupada asked that the picture of Lord Nrsimha be taken from the altar and put beside his bed. Some devotees feared that Prabhupada might be about to pass away. The next morning, when the illness continued, the devotees called for local Kaviraj, Ayurvedic doctor. The old Kaviraj came and diagnosed Prabhupada's illness as severe blood dysentery. Oh my God. He left medicine, but it was ineffectual. Later, when Prabhupada called Bhavanand to his room and requested fried puris with a little patal, an Indian vegetable similar to small squash, and salt, Bhavanand protested. Such fried foods would be the worst thing for him. Prabhupada said that this was the blood dysentery cure his mother had given during his childhood. I didn't know that. Blood dysentery, and he was wanted to have fried puris with little patal, whatever it is called. He then called for his sister and, speaking to her in Bengali, told her to prepare puris and patal. A few hours after taking the food, Prabhupada again called Bhavanam. He was feeling better. "My mother was right," he remarked. A lengthy telegram arrived from Shyam Sundar glorifying the preaching opportunities that awaited Prabhupada in London, where he would be picked up at the airport in a helicopter and flown to the main event, the greatest Rath Yatra ever held. The parade would proceed down Piccadilly Lane, climaxing under a large pavilion at Trafalgar Square. The telegram went on to say that millions of Englishmen, including certain very, very important people, were eager to see Srila Prabhupada, and that arrangements were underway for Prabhupada to instruct the Queen's eldest son, Prince Charles, in Krishna consciousness. Wow. So devotees had done wonderful preaching in London. Some of the promises were exaggerated, Prabhupada knew, but his desire to preach again in England was strong. George Harrison had given the devotees a large estate 45 minutes outside of London. And Prabhupada spoke of going there and installing deities of Radha and Krishna on Janmashtami Day. Yet even now, over a month before Janmashtami, he was feeling deeply affected by Shyam Sundar's invitation. Although still exhausted from dysentery, he considered flying immediately to London. Calling so even in his sickness, he was ready to go to London because there was preaching opportunities. Calling in those GBC secretaries and sannyasis with him in Calcutta, sitting up in bed while they sat before him on the floor, Prabhupada asked their advice. They concluded that he should go to a healthier climate, Los Angeles or Hawaii, to rest and recuperate. Prabhupada mildly agreed as his advisors decided Hawaii would be the best place, a place where the climate was ideal and where he would have few interruptions. Suddenly, however, he sat up straighter. He would return to the West, he said, but to London, not to Hawaii, and not to recuperate, but to preach. Let me strike when the iron is hot, he said. I think that this is an English maxim. If you do that, then you can keep the iron in shape. In the West, people are fed up, so we want to give them spiritual enlightenment. Prabhupada had immediately convinced his disciples with his forceful statements. There are two misleading theories in the West. One is that life comes from matter, and the other is that there is no life after death. You can just enjoy this life. They say everything is matter, so as this Krishna consciousness movement grows, the communists will be curbed down. People say they are trying for unity, but they have no brains to see how this will achieve unity. They have formed a big, complicated League of Nations and now United Nations, but they all fail. But this simple method of Rath Yatra, all over the world, it is spreading. Jagannath means Lord of the Universe. So Lord Jagannath is now international God through our ISKCON. Therefore, I want to go to the West to give them these things. Although Prabhupada appeared physically unfit to immediately fly to London to the active preaching that awaited him, his disciples submitted, accepting this as another miracle by Krishna. So even in this situation, he was ready to fly. London, July 7, 1973. Parvidha. It was Rath Yatra day. I saw Prabhupada coming into the temple and he didn't look very strong. I was really amazed, but I could understand that his strength was something spiritual. Dhruvnath. At the parade site, we were waiting to receive Srila Prabhupada at Marble Arch, where the procession starts. The Vyasasana was nicely decorated, and everybody was expecting Prabhupada simply to sit on his Vyasasana on the cart and just ride through the streets, just as he had done in the other Rath Yatras. So it was to our great amazement and joy that when Prabhupada came, he refused to sit on the Vyasasana. He indicated that he would dance and lead the procession. Yogeshwar. They brought stairs up so Prabhupada could mount the Rath cart and sit down on the Vyasasana. But he waved them off and just started walking with the chariots, leading the dancing. Dhirshanta. I twisted my ankle and couldn't walk, so I rode on the cart. Therefore, I could see Prabhupada very clearly. Revati Nandan Maharaj was chanting into the microphone from the cart. But after about 15 minutes of the procession, Prabhupada told the devotees to tell Revati Nandan Maharaj and others to come down and lead the kirtan in the street with him. Revati Nandan. When Prabhupada saw his Vyasasana on the cart, he said, "No, I'm just a devotee. I'll go in the procession." We had a big, great kirtan. Hansaduta led, I led, Shyam Sundar led. Therefore, devotees traded off, leading this fantastic kirtan. And Prabhupada was right in the middle of the kirtan with his kartals the whole time. He was dancing back and forth and jumping up and down and dancing. So this is this is what happened in Rath Yatra, Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra. Prabhupada was not well, but still he was leading the dancing. He was in the procession. Rohini Nandan, the cart was going quite slowly. Prabhupada walked about 20 or 30 yards ahead of the cart, leading the procession. Meanwhile, the kirtan was coming from the Rath cart through microphones. Prabhupada called them all down and he got them all around himself, and they were chanting Hare Krishna. Ever so often, he would turn around and raise both his arms very majestically in the air and say, Jai Jagannath. Sometimes we would get a little further ahead, so then he would turn around and wait for the cart to come on. Sometimes he was dancing and sometimes he would stand, raising his hands in the air. Shardiya Dasi. Prabhupada would dance, and then after a few feet, he would turn around and look up at the deities with the arms raised. Then he would dance for a few moments, meditating on the deities, and then he would turn around and go on. In this way, he danced the entire way. The devotees held hands in a circle around him to protect him from the crowd. It was a wonderful transcendental affair. Prabhupada was looking up at the deities, and all the devotees were behind him. So all the devotees had different realizations, so experiences they're sharing it. Sudurjaya, Prabhupada surprised us. We didn't know if he was sick or not, feeling weak and dizzy or not. Sometimes he looked very ill, and sometimes he looked like an 18-year-old boy. He surprised us. He had his cane in his hand but raised it in the air as he danced. After a while, Shamsundar came up to me and said, "Listen, he's not going to make it. Prabhupada is very ill. I want you to follow in a car. Be within 30 seconds. Reach so we can put Prabhupada in the car immediately." Prabhupada was going down Park Lane, and from time to time he would turn back and raise his hands. He was going so fast that they could not pull the cart fast enough to keep up with him. He would have to wait for the cart to catch up. He would turn back, raise his hands, and say, "Hari Bol." Several times he did that. He was going so fast that we had to wait. The devotees were dancing, the weather was beautiful, and the crowd was wonderful. Dhruvnath. The passers-by were rooted to the spot, looking at Prabhupada. A man of that age simply dancing and jumping in the air like a young boy was a most amazing sight. And then every 5 minutes or so, Prabhupada would turn around and look toward Jagannath. The devotees would clear the way so no one blocked his sight. And he had a perfect view of Jagannath, Balram, and Subhadra. But after a while, the police came in motion that we couldn't keep stopping like this. We had to keep the whole thing going because the traffic jams were becoming critical. Devotees were crying and chanting and dancing, and there was much commotion. Shudkirti, Shudkirti Prabhu, because he was a person servant of Prabhupada. When Prabhupada was dancing the bobbies in Britain, policeman is called bobby. The bobbies kept on coming up and looking for someone official. Finally, they came to me and said, "You will have to tell your leader to sit down. He's causing so much of a disturbance. Everyone is becoming wild and we cannot control the crowd. So I said, all right, but I didn't say anything to Prabhupada. Nobody could control Prabhupada in that Rath Yatra. So then they came again and said, "You must tell him he will have to sit down." So I said, all right. And I tapped Prabhupada. The whole time he had been in ecstasy, dancing before the cart and encouraging everyone else to dance. He would motion with his hands and encourage the devotees to keep dancing. He kept the momentum of the festival. So I said, "Prabhupada, the policemen want you to sit down. They say you're creating havoc in the parade." Prabhupada looked at me, turned and kept on. He completely ignored it and kept on dancing. And they couldn't do anything. Prabhupada wouldn't stop and the police wouldn't say anything to him. We can only imagine the mood of that Rath Yatra. I'm pretty sure there must be some video of that Rath Yatra. We can see it. Parvita, I was distributing Back to Godhead magazines along the whole parade route. I was exhausted and I was having a lot of trouble keeping up with the procession. But Prabhupada was just there and he was dancing like a young boy. I was amazed at his spiritual energy. Dhruvnath, when we came to Piccadilly Circus, Prabhupada suddenly stopped the whole procession. Piccadilly Circus, of course, was just packed with people. For about 3 minutes, Prabhupada stopped the procession and just danced and danced with the devotees all around him. Rohini Nandan. When we got to Piccadilly Circus, Prabhupada really started to dance. He was leaping off the ground. The cart was stopped. It was very similar, actually, to the description in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of how Lord Chaitanya would lead the Rath Yatra procession. So the cart was stopped, and Prabhupada would wait for it to catch up. Yogeshwar, when we finally arrived at Trafalgar Square and Prabhupada saw the big tent and other arrangement the devotees had made, he held up his hands again. He had been dancing and walking the entire route of the parade. It must have been at least an hour that he had been walking and dancing, all the way from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square. 1 hour. That's amazing. Dancing, not just walking, dancing, jumping in the air. Rohini Nandan, when Prabhupada got to Trafalgar Square, he immediately sat down on the plinth of Nelson's column on the little Vyasasana and delivered a lecture about the holy name of Krishna. This was directly after his marathon of chanting and dancing. The next day's papers carried favorable news coverage of the festival, and Prabhupada wrote of it to a disciple in Los Angeles. You'll be glad to know the Rath Yatra in London was very successful. The Daily Guardian had a picture on the front page of our cart and stated that we were competition to the monument in memory of Lord Nelson in Trafalgar Square. My health is good and I'm taking daily walk and speaking at the class in the morning. In another letter, Prabhupada wrote, our festival here was very well received and I was so much encouraged by the whole thing that I was able to walk and dance the entire way from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square. Srila Prabhupada settled into a regular routine at Bhaktivedanta Manor. Here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, he wrote, the place is the nicest possible. It is calm and quiet and the village is neat and clean. Prabhupada's room on the second floor was spacious enough to seat 50 guests comfortably, and its large windows overlooked the expansive grounds. So yes, it's a beautiful property. George Harrison donated. Prabhupada said if the devotees would clean out the lake and keep up the grounds, then he would stay always at Bhaktivedanta Manor and translate here in peace. They should get some cows, he said, and use some of the extra acreage for farming. Although the devotees had not long been living in the manor and had done little to improve the buildings and grounds, Prabhupada pointed out a place where they could one day build a 30-story temple. A 30-story temple, the grandest building in all of London. He proposed that he stay for at least 2 months and install Radha Krishna deities on Janmashtami Day. He would also oversee the construction of the temple room and altar. So he wanted a 30-story building, temple, that place. Every morning at about 6, Prabhupada would leave the manor for an hour's walk. There was no restriction as to who could join him. And sometimes as many as 20 devotees would trail behind, trying to hear anything he might say. Looking off towards the horizon, he commented that Lechmore Heath reminded him of Vrindavan because so much of vegetation, trees, ground is there. Prabhupada would walk down the lane to a place called Round Bush, stroll past a wheat field, and finally return to Lechmore Heath and the manor. The local policemen had become friends with the devotees and would regularly exchange greetings with Prabhupada. Particularly, Prabhupada liked the cleanliness of the little village, and he would often point out even the smallest pieces of trash on the manor grounds. The village, he said, was much neater than American towns. Yes, somehow they keep everything neat and clean. Shyam Sundar had promised Srila Prabhupada many interested visitors, and Srila Prabhupada reciprocated, promising that as long as the interested people kept coming, he would remain in England. Each night, 1 or 2 guests, including scholars, priests, and occasional celebrities, would come and visit with Prabhupada for a couple of hours. Prabhupada seemed especially eager to present the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to intelligent persons. As the world's foremost Vaishnava Parampara philosopher of the Gita and the Bhagavatam, he had thoroughly realized the conclusions of the Vedic literature. He was experienced in countering all challenges and atheistic philosophies and knew what to expect from Christian, Mayavadi, atheist, anyone. If a guest mentioned the name of a philosopher or school of thought unfamiliar to Prabhupada, then Prabhupada would simply ask, what's his philosophy? Inevitably, he would recognize a new philosophy for what it was, an old, familiar, mundane philosophy, with a new twist, perhaps, easily defeated or brought to its perfection with Krishna consciousness. And this is another thing. Prabhupada would ask, what's the person's philosophy? And then he would defeat the philosophy. He never criticized the person, the philosopher, or the scientist, or whatever. He never criticized. He just criticized their work. where, where they are wrong. Prabhupada was always eager to glorify Krishna and repeat Krishna's message, and with complete enthusiastic freshness, he would present again the same points he had presented many, many times before. He said he was like a cow that gives milk in any field. Put him in India or America or England, he would always give the same nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. So, without changing any philosophy, without changing any words, he just gave the same thing. Prabhupada's entire day is early morning dictation of Chaitanya Charitamrita, morning walk, Bhagavad Gita lecture, talks with the guests, revolved around philosophy. In Scotland, when a man had challenged that God need not be presented through philosophy, Prabhupada had replied, "What do you expect me to talk? Some fairy tales?" Philosophy was necessary, especially for the so-called intelligent persons, whose minds raised so many intellectual doubts. And besides, to always be telling others about Krishna, Prabhupada said, was a symptom of love. So love meant to glorify the beloved. And that beloved is Krishna. Unlimited glorification can happen. So that is love. Somebody wants to glorify Krishna. And that is kirtan actually. Kirtan means to do kirti. Actually, it means chanting, it means dancing, and it means preaching, it means doing other services like cooking for Krishna, dressing Krishna, taking care of his temples. Everything glorifies Krishna at the end of the day. And that is kirtan. And devotees do it with love. Moved by compassion for others' suffering, Prabhupada always spoke the message of Krishna, never tired of repeating it. He was genuinely angered by the atheistic speculators who mislead the people because materialistic and impersonalistic philosophies ruined a person's chance of finding the solution to life's suffering. Whenever Prabhupada heard anyone arguing the Mayavad doctrine, he would become like fire. He could not tolerate it. He had to correct it. When after one of Prabhupada's lectures at the manor, a boy had said he had heard someone call the chanting of Hare Krishna a little bit of a bluff. Prabhupada replied, "Who says bluff? Who's that fool? Who's that rascal?" He had been ready to fight the atheist to glorify Krishna. And actually this rascal word was given by British only. They made it popular in India. And now Prabhupada is using the word in England. These were Prabhupada's natural drives. Therefore, he could go on and on without stopping. He wanted to give people Krishna consciousness. He had no other life. Even while relaxing in the privacy of his room, he always spoke of Krishna consciousness. The devotees had invited many prominent British citizens to meet Srila Prabhupada, and the responses were good. Economist Ernst Schumacher promised to visit, as did philosopher Sir Alfred J. Ayer. When Shamsundar informed Prabhupada that Mr. Iyer was well known, Prabhupada replied, "What's his philosophy?" Well, Shamsundar replied, "He doesn't believe in the existence of God." "I'll give him evidence," Prabhupada replied. "I'll ask him what he means by the existence of God. I'll ask him to make a list of the deficiencies of God's existence." Prabhupada liked to meet with philosophical men and corner them and defeat them. Historian Arnold Doyen was old and invalid. Therefore, Prabhupada agreed to visit him at his residence. Interested in discussing life after death, Dr. Doyen asked Prabhupada about karma. Most people, he said, were afraid of death. Prabhupada agreed and added that according to a certain astrologer, one of India's recent leaders had taken birth as a dog. So they are afraid they will go down. He said, when Doyen asked if karma could be changed, Prabhupada replied, yes, but only by bhakti, devotion to God. Arnold Doyen. Not many people in the West are thinking of this. So, as Prabhupada mentioned, according to a certain astrologer, one of India's recent leaders had taken birth as a dog. So who was that? So according to Prabhupada, or according to that astrologer, and Prabhupada later clarified it, it was Jawaharlal Nehru. He had taken birth as a dog in, I believe, in Sweden, or one of the European countries, in a family which already has another dog. He was so precise. And he said, now he had to share the family's love with another dog. Prime Minister of India, first Prime Minister of India, taking birth as a dog. So anything can happen. So we have to make sure our karmas are right, our desires are proper. Prabhupada. So Arnold said, not many people in the West are thinking of this. Prabhupada, they're less intelligent. It's not good. If they take to Krishna consciousness, they can continue to work and live in the city, but they can change their consciousness. Then automatically everything will come. Srila Prabhupada asked Dr. Toynbee about the book he was writing, and the professor replied that it concerned ancient Greece's influence on the Greece of today. The Greeks came from India, Prabhupada said. Vedic culture was once all over the world, gradually a new type of culture, just like this recent partition of India and Pakistan took place. Prabhupada explained how in the future the governments would fall to rascals and thieves whose only business would be to exploit the citizens. Food would be scarce, and the governments would levy so many taxes that people would be harassed and go to the forest for shelter. So that is, as Kali Yuga progresses, this is going to happen. Only the God-conscious people would be free. The future would be an ocean of faults, but one saving factor. Simply by chanting Krishna's names, one could be freed. Even now, Prabhupada said the hippies were going to the forest, and the men were separated from their wives and money and were going to the hills and forests in disappointment. You can predict the future in this way, Prabhupada said. Arnold Toynbee. In India, did the politicians keep the Vedas? Prabhupada. No, they threw them away. Present Indian politicians are not very satisfied with the Vedas. They threw them in the water. I've started among the Indians and Americans, and for the next 10,000 years, Krishna consciousness will increase. Then there will be a gloomy picture of Kali Yuga. 10,000 years is not a short time. It's our duty on behalf of Krishna. So that Mahaprabhu had blessed 10,000 years of Kali Yuga to be golden period. And Prabhupada also said his books will be the law books for next 10,000 years. So these 10,000 years are very, very important because Krishna consciousness will increase, as Prabhupada said. And Kali Yuga, simply by chanting Krishna's names, one can go back home, back to Godhead. And then he said there will be gloomy picture of Kali Yuga. Gloomy picture. Really, the Kali Yuga will take effect after that. I mean, we think the time is bad now. Just imagine what will happen after that. When 10,000 years, no more Ganga, no more Yamuna, Govardhan, Braj, they all will unmanifest themselves. No Krishna consciousness, nothing. And many times people are very fond of going to heaven. In fact, when somebody dies, we always write Swargiya so and so. Means he went to Swarga. We don't know whether he went or not, but at least we hope that person went. But these days, there is a problem in going to heaven. This is a current news, breaking news. If one goes to heaven, I mean, depends on which planet he goes to. There are 14 planetary systems, 6 down, Earth, and 7 up. So the minimum life on heaven is 100 years, but if we calculate according to Earth, is 10,000 years. So from heaven, once somebody enjoys his results of pious activities, he falls back on Earth with the rain. the soul comes down. So then now the problem is, if somebody goes to heaven now and he comes back after 10,000 years, then there will be Kali Yuga in full effect on earth. So what's the point? I mean, then the person, that the soul has to really go through the Kali Yuga miseries of Kali Yuga, as mentioned in Bhagavatam. So why go to heaven now? It's just like somebody goes on vacation in India, suppose, to a wonderful place, and then when he comes back, all his house is gone, stolen, everything is stolen, and he has to work as a laborer. Why? What's the point in going for a vacation? Might as well work little harder. In fact, going to heaven, one needs to work harder. To do bhakti, one doesn't need to work that hard. And it's very pleasurable, blissful to begin with. And in the end, Prabhupada's get it. One goes back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual, to Golok Vrindavan, from where one does not come back. Of course, the independence is still there, but chances are he will not misuse his independence. So let's plan to put more stress on our chanting, on our devotional service, on reading Prabhupada's books, and other aspects of bhakti, and get more and more serious of going back home in this life only. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare.
Prabhuji, it's really scary. ये सुनकर के 10,000 वाला.
हाँ, तो है ही है.
So we should not do any pious activity in that manner. मतलब अगर इस चीज को पॉइंटर में रख के देखें कि 10,000 years and all that स्वर्ग and all that, then person should only do a bhakti. No pious activity, nothing.
But one who is doing bhakti, he will not do impious, no, he will do pious activities only. But with the consciousness of Krishna. Pious activity is what? Like helping somebody.
हाँ, helping somebody और कुछ भी like anything, जैसे लोग NGOs में चले जाते हैं and they do सेवा with बुजुर्गों की सेवा कर रहे हैं, ये कर रहे हैं, वो खाना खिला रहे हैं, सब मतलब any kind of good activities in deed.
Well, better than
Noble
not doing any good
activities or
activity.
noble activities, or you can say.
But it's better than not doing, or better than sinful activity. So if somebody does pious activities, maybe he will not go to heaven, he'll have a better birth next life.
Acha, okay.
On earth, he can take better birth.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, pious activity has to be done.
Mm.
In Bhagavad Gita, it is tap, dan, and yajna. It is never to be given up by anybody, everybody. Everybody has to do that. And by doing pious activities, one can create sukriti, agyat sukriti, and then he can come in contact with the devotees.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji.
Chalo, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhuji. Jai Srila.